Ma'am, thank you for being here. This committee has been focused on plastics for quite some time, and as I always like to say, almost a war on plastic. I want to be very careful as we're moving forward that the EPA is actually working with industry, not just working with activists and knowing where we're headed. And I do have some concerns because last month the EPA announced 5 more chemicals for prioritization underneath TSCA, all of which use plastics. The chemicals that they're using all goes towards plastics, including vinyl chloride, which is a chemical used for PVC piping. Obviously, that is something I'm very familiar with, and it raises alarms because, I mean, we use PVC piping in almost all your homes now, either through your drainage or your water. Most of our drinking water is delivered through PVC piping. And when we start looking at eliminating, there's a lot of questions to say, okay, well, what are you going to do then? And obviously, what are you going to replace it with? You were quoted recently in a press release. You chose to quote a partisan, what I would consider very partisan, radical anti-plastic activist and president of Beyond Plastic named Judith. I'll leave her last name out of it. In the article, Chairman, I'd like to enter into record from E&E News, December 14th, a quote that Dr. Freedhof credited that meeting with Judith is making a real difference as we move forward to make these decisions. My question...
Without objection.
Thank you. My question, ma'am, is when you go on a victory lap with activists and include their quote directly under your press release, how does manufacturers, contractors who work in the industry have any confidence that this is not just an activist move driven by and prejudged before it even comes out?
Thanks for that question. I think that any of the stakeholders who work on TSCA, whether they're companies, whether they're families who have lost family members because of exposures to chemicals, environmental organizations, labor organizations, other federal agencies, there's not any of them who would say that they feel like me or my staff aren't accessible to them, don't listen to them, and aren't attempting to fairly implement the law.
I think being accessible is not the question here. When you quote an activist in your paper, when you're releasing information that you're going after plastics, and you're quoting a president of an activist group that's Beyond Plastics, and you didn't quote any industries in there, when you got a movement towards that to begin with, being accessible doesn't mean you're listening, doesn't mean you're taking the industry into account or what is the next step for the industry. That a lot of people listen in Washington, D.C., but they already have their mind made up where they're headed. And when you quote someone like that, it would obviously send shockwaves to the industry saying that your mind is already made up before you even made this decision that you're looking into it. So I'm asking, how can they be confident that you're actually taking them into consideration?
First of all, I'd say we met with the industry to tell them what our short list of chemicals was before we met with any of the, with that particular organization. Second of all,
why would you choose the need then to quote her?
I think there is an undeniable interest in a large part of the community in taking a look at the chemicals that are used to make plastic. Vinyl chloride was actually the example used by the Nixon administration in the 70s for why Congress should write a Toxic Substances Control Act in the first place. But I assure you, we've got a multi-year scientific process that precedes any regulatory decisions, and we haven't even started that process. We are committed to being fair.
When you say multi-year, what are you talking about? So before your decision is coming out on anything, you're going to spend years studying this.
Correct.
So what does that look like?
So in the next year, what we're trying to do is work with federal agencies, industry, other organizations get data and really sort of get ahead of our risk evaluation process so that we can meet our deadlines. After this year passes, the law gives us 3 to 3.5 years to actually finish the draft risk evaluation. There will be multiple public comment periods as well as a peer review of the draft risk evaluation during that time. So really, an enormous number of opportunities for companies to provide their perspective and give us their data. It's only after that that we would move to proposing a rule for vinyl chloride. And I can assure you with full confidence that nobody at the agency has made up has any idea of what that rule would look like. We've only just started.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for those questions. We've been rejoined by Senator Markwayne Mullin.